is JJ from Once Somerville. Thanks so much for being here. It's great to see you. What you're about to enjoy is some special content created just for you by the Once family. We appreciate the time that the artists have given, and we've put a link to their tip jar in the comments below. We've also put a link there to our GoFundMe. This is one of the ways that we're going to get through this time until we can be open and together again. Art and community are our priorities here at Once. We really miss you, and we can't wait until we can all be back together. Until then, this is our way of holding our community close and continuing to make art. So, before you enjoy the show, a couple of notes. The bathrooms are in the back. On the left, no flash photography, and as always, no crowd surfing. Enjoy. We'll see you soon.
Okay. Hi, Brett. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks.
There you are.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So,
as FTC would say, are you receiving me?
Houston?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Oh, hello?
No, I'm joking. Hi. I totally got you. You're right there. I see you. Hey, it's like you're right there in the room with me.
I am.
Hi.
I'm right across the room from you.
You are. So how's it feel to have the microphone on you for a second, Brett?
This is fun. It's less work. I didn't have to stay up all night dreaming up questions. That you had to do that.
It's true. It's true. I actually did. I have been thinking about these questions for ages, and I sent you a few questions in advance, and we'll get to them.
Right.
I don't know if you might not have gotten them.
I did not get them, so I'm coming. You can take me by surprise. Yes.
Well, it's going to be a spontaneous interview. That's fine.
Good.
I'm fine with that.
I
know what the questions are.
I'm fine with that. So.
Cool. I want to start though with I want you to walk me a little bit through where did this all start for you, and what was it that what was that moment, if there was a moment, when you were like, I want to talk to musicians and write about what they tell me and tell their stories? What was that time?
For me, it would have been maybe 1973 or 4 when I was a lonely high school student in Wappingers Falls, New York. And the only entree to this other, more exciting world was going to the supermarket, and they had every unhip magazine there was, and they also had Cream and Circus. Not Rolling Stone, which I wasn't really that into, but Cream and Circus were wonderful. I mean, the covers would always be, usually the cover was Alice Cooper on Cream and Bowie on Circus. And inside there'd be Martha Hoople, even early Genesis, who they liked before they got out of Prague. But there were always these wonderful stories about what got to me was the angle of people actually hanging out with these folks and getting inside their heads and maybe getting led into that creative process of theirs. Like maybe that moment when they spilled a little bit about what would make them tick and what led them to make a record sound the way it did.
Mm-hmm.
And
getting
then,
to
of
that.
course, yeah. And then, of course, there was always that low-life decadence thing that was awfully appealing to me as a teenager. So every month they get both these magazines and devour them and just really fantasize about being on either side of that equation. I would have loved to be a famous rock star too, but
I was about to ask that.
Quite pull that off.
I was just about to say that. I was just about to say, because I was going to say, isn't it interesting that a lot of people, I think, open those magazines and think, I want to be a rock star, but you had this additional thought, which was, I also can find this way to get close to these people and be a part of it.
It was kind of what wound up happening. I mean, I never got good at playing music. And once I wound up in Boston, where you'd see your favorite band on stage, and you'd realize there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people in town that did this sort of thing well. And in terms of writing about it, there were maybe a dozen people in town that did that sort of thing well. So it was I got to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond, I guess.
And how did you get from the place with the name that I remember thinking that's a cute name, but now I don't remember what the name was, and in New York?
Oh,
And how did you get
Wappingers Falls, which is
Wappingers? Of course. And
yeah, which it's now like a real bedroom community for New York City, because there's the
of course.
it's like 20 minutes outside of Poughkeepsie is where it is.
So how did you Wappinger Falls to Boston?
Well, via Amherst. I went to Hampshire College. I went there after Arthur Baker graduated, but before Elliott Smith showed up. And because we didn't really have a newspaper there, I wound up with a couple of people that became good friends for many years, writing for the UMass Daily Collegian. And also, we didn't have a radio station either, so I did college radio at Amherst College. And again, it was great, because being in that era, like 1979, 80, most of college radio was still people playing live dead tapes. And if you were going to go on and play, whatever it was, the Ramones, you had a much smaller group of people that were willing to do that. And so I got to do that for a couple of years, which was just enormous fun. And
there's a great history of a Halloween party at Hampshire.
Yeah, not at the time. I mean, to me,
I was wondering if you got to play with any of those. They were
the Halloween parties at Hampshire were like a real kind of acidy thing and a real kind of hippie-ish thing, which I was not really part of. There was a much smaller subculture of people in Hampshire that were gravitating toward the punk world and sneering, looking down their noses at 90% of the students at the college. So rather than transfer out, which would have been the smartest thing to do, we just sort of stood around and sneered at those people.
I remember there being shows, but they must have been later a little bit.
Much Nirvana did not happen.
That would have been late.
Nirvana 80s. Played there. The one good band I remember playing at Hampshire College was the Swinging Madisons, who are not, they had a song called Guilty White Liberal that was a college radio hit at the time, but their singer was Christian Hoffman, who became big in the LA alternative scene. Their guitar player, Robert Mache, wound up joining a great band called the Continental Drifters and playing with Steve Wang. So I'm glad to have seen that band, but otherwise, you'd have to go. I mean, my great musical event during those years was in fall of '77. The Ramones played at the Blue Wall at UMass with this guy from Boston, this guy who took off a shirt and rolled around on the floor, named Willie Alexander, and I'd never heard of him. And I'd never heard of him. So that was my first punk rock show.
So when you got to Boston, did you?
Yeah.
When you got to Boston, did you find Willie Alexander? Did you seek out Willie Alexander?
I was a bit of a wallflower. That's kind of my nature. So I did go to his shows. I didn't go up and introduce myself to a lot of these people, but I did, in one burst of confidence, send some clips to Steve Morse at the Globe, who I guess at that time had the bandwidth and had the space to give a new writer a chance. And after pestering him for about 2 months, I finally got. There was a Supertramp show at the Worcester Centrum that nobody else was willing to go to, and I was. So that was my entree. And I guess I wound up saying something fairly coherent about Supertramp, which is not
great
easy.
To the Centrum.
Yeah.
With a backstage pass and probably a song limit, and wow.
The song, and I had a printed set list, so I knew what songs they were going to play. I had a better seat than everybody else, and I thought, wow, this is fun.
That's pretty cool. That threw you right into the deep end. That's really cool.
Well, yeah, I remember the first few times, because writing, I remember every aspect of writing for the Globe. You get home at around midnight. The review was due at 10:30 the next morning. So I would literally stay up all night long, just writing multiple drafts of this thing, and realizing a few times down the line that I would be better in shape if I did not do that. So I would instead wake up early and do it.
Mm-hmm. And has that changed?
The
that
time
urgency?
it takes. Well, I haven't had since I'm not writing reviews for daily newspapers right now. I don't have those tight deadlines anymore, and I kind of miss them, because they were a real kick, having to having, you know, especially like later when you write a review for the next day's newspaper, that would involve, at that time, since we didn't have laptops yet, getting a taxi to the Globe office, getting there at about 11:15, and have to finish the review by 11:30, which was great because it goes so against my nature to just go with my first instincts and not be all anal about it. So, and also knowing that whatever I came up with would be read by most of the city in the morning. So it was great. Just I hope this is good. Here you go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Free
And a
fall.
lot of times I was unwilling to leave the show before the last encore because I really want to see it a lot of the time.
Sure.
So
You are a fixture at shows, at every show, and when in the 80s,
yeah.
when I was really active in the Boston area, we would all say, well, you know, it was a good show because Brett Milano was there.
Didn't necessarily mean it was a good show. I saw my share of really, really crummy ones, but
an important show. It was an
yeah.
important show because we knew that you could have been at any number of shows. So if you were at a show, it was because you were in the right place. We were watching the right thing. You were
I'm
a
glad
bellwether.
people felt that. I really, for me, there was nothing better than being able, you know, which is not the case anymore, but at that time, being able to get into any club I wanted, you know, to see any band. I didn't want to do anything else during those years. I didn't even own a TV for most of the 80s. I would just be out like 6 nights a week, if, you know, or so, just because somebody was playing that I didn't want to miss. So now I've got a million bands I can say that I saw.
Mm-hmm. So this is the question that I'm dying to ask that I sent to you in advance, but I bet you don't need to think about it at all. And this is my question. What is the furthest that you've ever traveled to conduct an interview and why?
The furthest I've ever traveled was Melbourne, Australia. And
As far as you can go.
as far as I can. Once you go further than Melbourne, Australia, you're coming back, you know, so it's not possible to go any further than that. But no, I had the real good fortune of writing for Tower Records magazine, Pulse, during the late 80s, early 90s, when there was a lot of money around. Yeah, I mean, Tower didn't actually pay the money. The labels paid the money to get their bands into the magazine.
Sure.
And the band at this point was Crowded House.
Advertising.
Yeah, and it was Crowded House, who I loved anyway. I mean, it was Tower. They were not that objective. They wanted to assign these stories to people that did love the band. And Crowded House, yeah, it was the Woodface album, which is the only one they made with Tim Finn as well as Neil Finn in the band. So I got to go completely across the world to spend a couple days with them, like watching them edit videos. I hit a club with them one night, and they're squeaky clean people, so it wasn't that decadent, and visited their houses. And the nice thing is they're very sweet guys, and they were very appreciative that somebody would come all that way to interview them. And I remember being severely jet lagged to the point where I would fall asleep at the drop of a hat, but enjoyed the experience. And I cannot imagine spending 23 hours on an airplane again, but I did it then. I don't think I ever would.
No, I wish I had, because now I can't imagine doing it.
And we didn't have like iPods yet or laptops, so I don't know. God knows how I spent that time.
How did they get? My mother is watching, and she's going to say, you know the answer to this question, but I really don't. So you would, when you typed something up, when you wrote something up for the Globe, and you were physically typing it up. Yeah. Right? How did they make it go from print to without a computer?
We had computers.
I can't remember how we did that.
The Globe had these really primitive blue screen computers, like no graphics, no internet, but it was basically this glorified phone hookup. And when I would do them on remote, there were these phone suction cups you put into a telephone, and you'd type a code on the little computer that would somehow feed it all over the phone lines. And it was real imperfect. A lot of times I would just wound up having to get an editor on the phone and reading it to him or her. It was back before everything was perfected.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
That made it fun.
Well, now I have this visual of it, which probably isn't quite accurate, but I see like a toilet plunger on the end of like an old landline.
It was a toilet plunger.
Uh-huh. Wow.
It was pretty similar. It was like a little rubber suction cup that would,
And it was
go on to
state
either
of the
end of
art.
the phone. Yeah,
That was very advanced technology. The newspapers, the
it
media
was at
had
the
advanced
time.
technology.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
totally. So this was not on my list of questions, but you said something about Crowded House not being very debauched.
Yeah,
So
no,
now
they were
I'm
not.
wondering, like, what is the debauched scale? Like, what is very debauched? Did you interview Gigi Allen?
I did not interview Gigi Allen, to my eternal regret. Um, I was always, I was always one of the less debauched people around. I hope, I certainly had my nights, but I tried to, keep myself. And that was true of a lot of the bands I hung around with too. I mean, I certainly had a couple of good beer drinking sessions with the Smithereens on various occasions. And
Mhm.
I remember one time, Robin Hitchcock and I went to TT the Bear's place on an off night and had an enjoyable, long sort of talk. But um, I did not get to go to any of the legendary parties, and I don't know how I managed to miss them, but I pretty much did.
Maybe they didn't happen.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, I'm the
Don't you
one that got to
wonder?
know Aerosmith when they were on the 12-step years. I didn't get to, I didn't come in time for those other years.
You missed the fun years?
It wa-
I'm not sure.
it was plenty fun, but
Yeah.
the one probably the most decadent thing I can imagine was when there was a band. I can't even tell you who the band was, but I was judging the Rumble, and I jokingly said, "Well, I'm a judge. You got to give me some cocaine now," and he in fact did it. So,
Oh, the 80s.
oh, the '80s, yeah,
Oh, the 80s.
yeah.
Definitely. So do you feel like, I mean, obviously one really big way that things have changed is computers. You know, you sit down now, you bang something out, you can send it in, you don't have to use the suction cup and the dictation.
Yeah.
But do you feel like there's been, like, when you were talking before about having to turn something in so that the review was there the next day, and you sort of indicated that that isn't true anymore? Have things changed that much in?
Well, what has changed is that neither newspaper in town runs reviews on a regular basis anymore, which I
Mhm.
think is really an awful loss. I mean, which ties in with the amount of space that there is for an arts section in a newspaper now.
Mhm.
If you look at the Globe and the Herald, it's back when I came in, in the mid '80s, the Globe's art section was 4 or 5 pages a day. The printing was smaller, and there would be maybe two dozen articles of 600 or 700 words each, which
Mhm.
they were reviews of dance performances. They were like local theater performances. They were concerts that happened at the Rat or at Berkeley or any number of places, along with the big mainstream ones. They would just fill up this art space every day.
Sure.
They don't do that anymore. They are. I don't think there are any full-time arts writers in Boston at the moment at either newspaper. Um,
Wow.
there were a bunch.
The-
There were
Sure.
full-time book critics, there were full-time dance critics, there were full-time music critics at both newspapers during those days, which I think is a real awful loss, not just to Boston but to every major city. That there is not the investment to doing that, because that's what keeps the community together. It's what helps keep a community solvent.
Sure.
It's what puts it on the minds of everybody that that one of the many good things about living in Boston is that you've got a vital art scene. Great, I'm going to go
Absolutely.
spend some of my money on this every week.
Mhm.
Um,
I've
and
noticed with once, one of the things that I've noticed a lot is that there wasn't a lot of show reviews. It was all previews. Not, I mean,
exactly,
very little in print, but
yeah,
a lot
exactly.
of
I mean,
previews.
yeah, I'm still one of the more active daily newspaper writers in town, because I'm writing for the Herald, but that is one story a week. And it's a preview of something which, some weeks it gets to be a club show. So some weeks it's a bigger interview. And the Herald also has Jed Gottlieb that does a couple
Right.
of those a week too.
Right.
Um, but those usually run on Fridays or Sundays. The rest of the week, not. Which
What's
is
happening now?
what's that?
What's happening now with the Herald?
What's happening now? I personally am still doing the one story a week, which I have an editor I really like, Sandy Kent, and she basically likes, if I come up with a slightly off the wall idea, she'll like that. Like this week I did an interview with a woman who goes by the name of Noveller. She opened for Helium back at the Sinclair a couple years ago. She's an experimental art rock guitarist. She's like Sonic Youth crossed with Robert Fripp, but she's one woman. And she has a new record, which is very, very good. And because there aren't a million shows to preview, I got to do an interview with her based on this one record and get into a mainstream newspaper, which I still consider a bit of a thing when I can do that.
Huge. It's a huge
Yeah.
thing. It's
Yeah,
even
but
more now.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm also like hoping, I've previewed a few things that have come out at once. Next week I'm doing a story about Andrew Gillis and Mark Pinansky's weekly webcasts.
That's very
What
cool.
we're doing is just, writing about things that happen in that way. Like and it seems like every art story in every newspaper now is about how we're functioning in the current situation. How artists are functioning, how
As
people are
opposed to
functioning.
writing about their music.
Well, we're writing about the music, but writing about the context in which they're creating it at the moment.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
But there are a lot of people creating.
which is wonderful. In my, eternal, we should all give our eternal appreciation and some of our money to everybody that is creating at the moment, because they're helping get us through, and they get less reward either financially, just in terms of the interaction musicians have. I can imagine how much they're missing just being able to get in front of an audience and perform.
Sure. It's
Yeah,
how they get good,
yeah.
right?
You don't get to produce live shows, which probably sucks for you at this moment.
It's just crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah. But I mean, the ripple effect is huge.
it's horrible. Yeah,
What are you, so I mean, I'm excited about some stuff that I've seen
yeah,
people doing,
yeah.
obviously enough that I want to be doing it too. But what I want to know, because as the person that's always at the best shows, and I always look to you and, read about, if you're writing about it, I want to read about it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what has happened recently that what's caught your attention. Mike, that was a long way of me saying, what are you listening to? What's new?
Well, what am I watching? The Whistle Stop Rock shows, I think, have been great. They've been so Linnea and all her crew, and Justine, you're doing great. It's the mess around I watched online last week, and that was just so great to see those people's faces and see them perform. And a lot of my favorite musicians are doing regular webcasts. I mean, the Steve Wynns and Robin Hitchcocks and people like that. They've all been real creative about what they do with their live format. They've done entire albums, they've done thematic shows. I still check in because one of my passions is to go to New Orleans once or twice a year, and the musicians out there are actually playing outdoors at the moment, sometimes with even with an audience there. So I kind of watch those and try to beam myself there. And otherwise, like everybody else, I'm playing the new Bob Dylan album, trying to figure everything out on it.
I haven't heard the new Bob Dylan album.
It goes on a bit, but in a good way.
I bet it does.
Yeah.
I haven't heard it. I have to do that.
And I just heard right before getting online, I just clicked on a new song by Jello Biafra called Taliban USA, which is great, and everybody should go and look it up right now.
Okay. I'm completely obsessed with a band from Arizona, New Mexico called Prison Bitch.
Oh,
have you heard
need
them?
to look it up.
Obsessed. I listen to them constantly. Shout out to Prison Bitch. They're awesome. Cool. So I do want to take the opportunity to, if anybody had a question, you're welcome to post it in the comments and or chat. We're on Zoom, so it's chat. You can also, if you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube or anywhere, I'm pretty sure that if you were to comment that somebody on the Once Virtual Venue team would see it and let me know. maybe they can chat at me and let me know if they saw, if they can. But I want to know what band, what interview have you gone into expecting something that went in completely a different direction? And can you tell me about it?
Oh, that's a real good question. Let me think about that. There's been times when I would expect somebody to be really high and mighty, and they turn out to be really down to earth, and vice versa. The one that comes to mind is just one of the most surprisingly nice people I've ever talked to is Robert Plant.
Oh,
Who, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, who is just he's completely comfortable in his own shoes. He doesn't need to prove anything to anybody. And he actually he ran into me backstage at some gig 3 years later and remembered me.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
amazing, because you would think
Just said hi, which was great.
he probably runs into a lot of people.
Yeah. I've
That's cool.
I've talked to people that have wound up being like self-conscious that I would not expect, like Natalie Merchant. I remember was really self-conscious, and I had to like reassure her a little bit. So that was trying to I've been, I'll knock wood on this one, but I've had very little, of those horrible, disappointing experiences where you meet somebody that you expect to be, that you bonded with all your life, and they turn out to be a total jerk. Knock wood, I have managed to avoid that experience, and I hope I hope I continue to. The worst that can happen, especially in recent years, is when you get somebody who is just not just cordial but not that interested in doing an interview and doesn't really respond to any of your questions, and just I've David Byrne is famous for that, because he's like I don't think so anymore, but back when I did get the occasion to talk to him, he was a one sentence guy. The answer to every question was one sentence, and I felt awful until about a month later I saw him being interviewed by David Letterman, and he was doing the exact same thing. So I kind of thought, okay, I got off the hook easy.
Yeah, totally. So this is a question that has to do, I think, in a bigger way with when there were more music journalists. Was there kind of well, the word this person used was competition, but was there sort of a race for stories? Was it the old newsroom with the hat and the pencil and like, you got a hot tip?
Oh,
They're like a between writers.
Yeah, there definitely was. I mean, in my heyday at the Globe, there was Steve Morse, Jim Sullivan, and me, and and I was the one at the bottom of the totem pole, because I
Right.
had I'd come in last. And I have a bit more of you know a bit more of a shy personality, I think. A lot of times I would just defer, but the one good thing about that situation is that we all had pretty different taste. A lot of time, I mean, he would have the line on Jim Sullivan usually would have the line on the major alternative acts, and I could kind of handle that, as long as I could get game theory into the Globe, which I managed to do once. And
you were doing the good work.
What's that?
You were doing the good work. You were supporting the little guy.
For me, I was, but and I think that's one thing that has been lost now, that there aren't a lot of multiple arts writers out there with different tastes. Is you would choose who you identified with,
Mm-hmm.
and people would, you get a sense of whose taste more matched yours, and that's who you'd follow. And at that time in Boston, you had a pretty good choice of different personalities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you ever write about like, I don't think I've ever seen you do this. Do you ever write about like theater, performative art that isn't music?
No, that isn't music. No, I did. Especially when I got onto the Phoenix later, I got sent to cover a lot of shows that were musicals. I remember
How was
covering,
that?
I remember covering Barry Manilow's Casablanca musical, which was
Oh
pretty
no, that's
special.
awesome. Well,
It
hold on.
wasn't,
I thought you were going to tell me
it
that you
wasn't
had
too
gone to
bad.
cover cats or something, but that's
It
awesome.
wasn't too bad. No, I did not have to do cats.
Cheers to that.
But you know, one thing I'm doing now, I'm writing for Harvard and covering lectures and symposia and things that are
Yeah.
political that happened at the Kennedy School. And in a lot of ways, that's the same buzz because you're kind of absorbing an event and writing about it overnight. But that calls on a whole different, you know, hopefully set of skills.
This is an awesome question. I love it when people ask questions because sometimes people put wording better. Are there bands that you liked, but then you were surprised by how big they got because you didn't really think they'd appeal to such a wide audience, which is really right in your wheelhouse because, of course, you're looking at a lot of bands that you're like, this is a great band, but then, you know, you feel that they should go further. But who did it?
I thought every band I liked was going to go further.
But no, but this question is a little more nuanced. This is, who did you think was great?
REM definitely. Yeah, REM definitely. I mean, I can't say I was surprised because I thought they were that good.
But who surprised you?
Who surprised me?
That you were like, yeah, they're great. I can't believe everybody got it. I sort of felt that way about REM a little bit.
Yeah, most of the bands I liked did not really. Let me think.
That's always sort of true.
Yeah.
Because these bands that have staying power in a lot of ways achieved a huge amount of success.
Yeah.
Like when you say Robin Hitchcock, like,
yeah, he's a legend, but
he's a legend.
But he didn't have his hit single. There's not a million people out there that can hum Chinese Bones when you mention that song title, and there ought to be, by God.
There might be. You don't know.
There might be, yeah.
Right now, a million people have just.
One thing that surprised me is when I saw the Liars in 1985 or so, and they've been my favorite Boston band for many decades, and I remember jokingly saying to somebody, "Yeah, I can't wait to see this band in the year 2000." Blah blah, and kidding. And not only did I see them in the year 2000, but that was 20 freaking years ago, and I'd be seeing them this month if we were still seeing shows. So I am, the bands I jokingly said I'd be seeing well into late middle age that I still am seeing well into late middle age surprised me.
That's an excellent answer. I like that answer very, very much. It was a good question too. So, wow, we covered a lot of ground there.
Yeah, well, this is fun. This is fun, JJ.
It's fun, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely fun. Yeah.
Talking with you is fun. I'm not joking. Seeing your face at a show for a very long time has always been to me that I'm at the place that I want to be, that it was, the right place.
Particularly when it's your own place, that helps. Yeah.
You still are the great bellwether. So from Nick on Facebook, Brett, any book projects in the future?
Not at the moment. I tend to be I'm like the Peter Gabriel of book writing. I come up with one every 7 or 8 years.
Okay, so first start with what they are, so that
what they
we're
are
documenting this for posterity. And in fact, I'm going to ask Erin to please drop all of these links everywhere, because we'll do that. We'll drop links in the chat and the Facebook. So
most of them, sadly, are pretty hard to find right now. Vinyl Junkies, the first one, which was a book about the passions of record collectors, kind of that one was a good stretch for me, more writing about the personalities that collect records rather than, I always thought of that book as high fidelity in real life. That one I am really, really proud to say came out in 2001 and it's still in print. Which is, it's certainly done the best. Yeah, it's done the best of any of my books. Sound of Our Town, the one about Boston, is pretty hard to find now. You can still find it, but people are selling copies. Speaking of game theory, the bio I did of Scott Miller, the unsung pop genius who is the leader of game theory, the book called Don't All Thank Me at Once. That's harder to find. I need to work on getting it back in there, but there's that. And last year I put out a book in New Orleans called 300 Songs for 300 Years, which
Yeah.
was about kind of going into the entire history of that city's music, starting with things like Down by the Riverside
Great
and
book.
House of the Rising Sun that were written in the 19th century,
Mhm.
and coming up with every song that kind of embodies the city's history between now and then. So I did that last year. And what's next? I don't know, but we'll see what I can come up with.
There's so many options. So Mark wants to know, just because they say every rock writer has one, do you have a Lou Reed story?
No, I don't. I wish I did. I only ever talked to him once, and it was on the phone, and he was in a pretty good mood that day. Um, I had just gotten the Ecstasy album, which was one of his later ones, and I had driven back from a concert, and I told him the truth, which is that in playing the album, I played the 18-minute track on that album like a possum, and I got lost. Couldn't while driving home listening to the song. I said, "Oh man, you play possum and you're going to wind up in the next town," you know. And so I actually successfully broke the ice with Lou Reed. Oh, and I do have one other story. When I was an intern at a really hip radio station in 1982 called WBOS, it was at that time an alternative rock station. Lou Reed came in for a live interview. He comes in full leather wearing shades, and nobody will say a word. He stands there 30 seconds, not a word out of his mouth, and finally says, "You got a bathroom in this place?" So the
See, you do. You have two.
so there you go.
Okay,
Two Lou Reed stories.
so Mark, you're right. Every writer has apparently
They're not
at
as good.
least one.
If you read the Anthony DeCurtis book and read about the stuff that him and Clive Davis got up to together, wow, changed my opinion of Clive Davis for sure. For
Okay,
the
I'm
better,
sure
for the better, I will say. Yeah.
so when we can go back to shows, and we will. I feel this very strongly. It might take a while, but we will go back to shows. I like that somebody is giving a shout out to Once. Who would you want to see at Once or in another crowded club? I have a whole list of bands that I'm wishing that I had seen or could see again. Or is there anybody?
I'll see anybody. Like book any band into Once on, and the first night, I promise you, I will be there. What I'd love to do is to pick up right where we left off, because the last show I did not see before shutdown was Wire. They were going to be playing at the
Oh, that's
Sinclair.
right.
Yeah, it was Friday the 13th, and I
Sure
remember.
was.
Yeah, and all day, a lot of us on Facebook were agonizing: Are we going to brave the show? Can we do it, or will we get sick? And it turns out Wire were there. They were at the Sinclair. They set up and I think even did a sound check. And at about 5 that afternoon, the club said, "No, we're shutting. We're not going to do this." So it would be so great if somehow Wire came to Boston and played the first show that would happen after shutdown ends.
I like it.
Yeah.
I'd like to be there too. I didn't have a ticket to that show, and but I was certainly aware that it was happening. And Friday the 13th, the day the music died. But it didn't die. It just went to sleep. I keep saying this. It's just taking a break. Everything's on hold. It's cool. It's going to be okay. We're going to have live music again. It will happen. I know it will happen. But well, this is I have a list a mile long.
I just saw Amy's question. I got an answer to that.
I was going to say that. I have a list a mile long here. So who do you regret not having seen?
What do I remember the show I most regret seeing, which was the Minutemen at the Rat. And
Yep.
it was a Sunday night. Some friend called me up and said, "Hey, want to come?" Might have been Paul Robichaux, another local writer and photographer, who called me that day and said, "You want to come down to the Rat and see the Minutemen?" And I was tired and I did not go. I regret that to no end, because I believe we lost Steve Boone maybe 3 months later. So yeah, and I never even saw the Minutemen. I did see Firehose a bunch of times.
Yeah, me too.
See him either?
Probably the same reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a deep one.
Oh, yeah.
So Sean wants to ask a flip-flop question. Can you name a couple of local bands over the years that you really did think were going to blow up, and they never quite got there? And then he also says, "Miss you both." And honestly,
Oh,
Sean
we miss
McNally,
we miss you.
I
We
miss
miss
you
you too,
too.
Sean.
I miss you too, Sean. And I think this is, I love this question coming from Sean, who has
Yeah.
done so many local shows, booked so many local shows.
Blowing up.
So,
I think like I thought at the time and still think that Throwing Muses should be recognized as one of the most important bands that ever came out of the Northeast. Up there with Sonic Youth and Husker Du and all the really important alternative bands.
mhm.
Throwing Muses, and they're still wonderfully good. They have a new album that's coming out in September. It's as good as anything I've heard in years.
And
And
you've heard it.
I have, well, it exists. It's been sent out, it was supposed to come out in July.
Oh,
So
so the advance is coming.
they had mailed out the advance copies, and then they delayed it till September. But Kristen Hirsch and Tanya Donnelly, both when she was in the band, are just incredibly great songwriters, and that should have been recognized as a trailblazing thing, and it wasn't. So that's a damn shame.
Mm-hmm.
I think a friend of mine was just talking about the Zulus because they just put out that 3 CD set. And they were supposed to be playing this month. I saw them breaking.
That was a big one.
Yeah, especially after they made that record on Slash that Bob Mould produced. I thought that one was really going to catch on.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Dump Truck were going to be big. In my mind, they were, and some parts around here they are. But it would be a very long list.
Yeah, and then there's bands that were on their way that got derailed somehow, and
which is all of them in Boston. So many, yeah.
So many, yeah. It just sort of proves that it all sits on the head of a pin. What's dancing on the head of a pin?
Yeah, or
what is that?
Dancing with tears in my eyes. No, sorry, I was flashing back to the mid-year show from February.
That's awesome. Did I see you at the Ultravox show at the Orpheum in 1980 nothing?
Oh, why didn't I see Ultra? I don't think I did see Ultravox. I wish I had.
You didn't reap the wild wind.
Yeah.
I love those shows. I'm going to ask you now to talk a little bit about I'm really not fishing here. My venue is a baby venue in the city of Boston, but I'd love to hear you reminisce just briefly. Unfortunately, we are gonna have to wind down soon, which I never ever want to do, Brett. I love this so much. It's so fun to hear.
I love it too. Yeah.
Tell me about venues. Talk to me a little bit about
venue. Well, one of the greatest nights I ever had at once was the night the Undertones played. That was such a joyful show. What's that?
I'm not fishing. I want you to talk about venues.
Why I'm especially glad they played it once, because it allowed them to make the joke. So the name of the city is Somerville. Are you all really big Bronski Beef fans here, or what?
Yes, it was a great.
Someone had to explain. Jimmy Somerville. Okay, it took me a minute to get that one. Venues.
Yes, that was a really like a muso joke. We all love the good muso joke.
That was a muso joke, yeah. I think one of the greatest things that ever happened in Boston was on Kenmore Square when the Rat and Storyville were both operating, and they actually staggered their sets so you could pay cover charge at both and go see one band in the middle, of the break at the other club.
Thank you for evoking Storyville. Nobody ever talks about Storyville. Storyville was an awful club.
It was awful, but I had so many. I was
the
at
sound was like, it was small and dark and well, the dark part was okay. They were both seedy underbelly rock clubs. They were wonderful, but I just remember Storyville being like, I can't hear this band.
Sure it was. And I remember the Violent Femmes and the Del Fuegos, the show that Juliana Hatfield sang about was at Storyville.
Was it?
Well, yeah, it was.
I remember seeing what were they called? Pylon.
Oh yeah.
I thought Pylon at Storyville.
That was a great, I loved Pylon.
They were great. They were great. That's the kind of band that I thought Pylon would have been bigger.
I thought they should have, and I know I'm actually Facebook friends with Vanessa, their singer, and there are some people, because
Very cool.
unfortunately the guitar player of Pylon passed away a few years ago, so Pylon itself isn't going to be playing anymore, but she has a group called the Pylon Reenactment Society,
Oh, that's
which is
adorable.
some people from down in Georgia that have become a really good at playing Pylon songs, and they got her to be their front woman. And it's so good to hear that.
All right, we need a link to that.
Yeah,
Aaron,
but just
Pylon, say it
Google
again, the
Pylon Reenactment Society. What?
Pylon Reenactment Society.
Yeah.
Aaron's gonna find it. Aaron is the master of finding links and other things. Aaron does all of our design, all that beautiful,
Aaron is
all
awesome,
those
yes.
great graphics. There it is, boom. All those great graphics at the beginning that I want you to know, by the way, I almost wore my hair down, but it was too hot. But like, you know, that power stance photo that they used of me in that graphic, I was like, well,
Yep.
maybe I should always wear my hair down. I had to think
you
about
look so serious. I'm used to seeing you grinning, you know.
And in that photo, the other thing that's weird about that photo is you can't see it, but I've got an enormous bruise on my arm in that photo, but I have no idea where it came from. So when it showed up there, I was like, oh, good, you can't see the bruise on my arm. I
That's why there's all
probably
the
walked
purple
into
colorizing
something.
stuff. Yeah.
I totally walked into something. So I want to thank you. I am going to wrap up soon. I'm going to give everybody one last, it's last call.
Let me
Last
tell everybody
call
how
for
much I miss them, by the way.
Final
I
question.
miss all you people.
All right, this is a great question, and I'm going to broaden it a little bit. Nick wants to know if you respond better to, give me a second because I'm going to add to it. Do you respond better to hard copies of advanced releases rather than download links? And I would like to invite you to orate a bit on how do you like to receive information from a band you've never heard of, unsolicited material. What is the best way? And you can start with, do you respond better to hard copy or digital download links? But I want to hear more about that because I think that it's helpful to musicians to know what you want to get.
Digital is absolutely fine. It's the way I do most of my listening nowadays, because I do play it on the computer, and I'm still, now it's old school to have an iPod, but I've got a bunch of iPods and they're all full of music, and that's I carry them everywhere I go. So I don't accumulate CDs anymore. So don't spend the money sending me a CD. But digital is fine.
Still collect vinyl?
Yes, I absolutely do collect vinyl.
Me too. All right, so the second part of this question, and this really is like something that I think about a lot as someone who sends press releases. Do you want a lot of information? Do you want no information? Just a link?
Kind of lead a little bit with what you sound like, what kind of band you fancy yourself being, and maybe that means I won't care at all, but some other writer will. But at least come up with come up with something to give me a one sentence idea of what I might hear if I was to click on the link. Because I'd like to say I was really good about always clicking on the links. Fact is, I could be a lot better about it. So maybe do that. It doesn't matter who you've opened for, that kind of thing, because everybody's done that. So just maybe just say a little bit of something about your music, so I might be enticed to hear it. And
yeah, cool. Well, I think that was your last call, folks. So I'm going to say thank you. Let's do this again. So much fun.
Yeah.
I'll come up with some new questions. Other people will be informed that they will have the opportunity to ask more questions.
Let's do this in real life one night at once after reopening. Let's just hang out in real life.
So something that we're working on right now is using the stage as a sound stage, and we have got that up and running where we can perform on stage with somebody filming. We set up cameras, stationary cameras, and then we have a couple of cameras that are on booms so that they're not too close to people. So this is something that we've started to work on, and it is possible that we could do a live interview.
Well done. Yeah.
So maybe next time we'll do it live.
All right, everybody take good care, and look forward to seeing you all in the future. Bye-bye.
I invite people to turn on their cameras if you want to give us a wave. You don't have to, but you can if you want to. And I'll be back next week with Joan Anderman good
Yeah,
friend.
one of the best in town. She is.
She's fantastic, and I know
The
she says
music's
the
damn
same
good
about
too.
you. It's a lovely community.
Yeah.
It really is.
All
So
right.
thanks for being a part of it, Brett. I'll see you soon.
Bye bye, y'all.
So dear to my heart. Bye bye. Have a great